Good day. To what I have said, which is, I knew the tribe of the serpent attacked the native Aboriginal people. They also have fought the red-haired giants. Somebody said her YouTube ID is eblasphemy1. She said, I'll bet they were Scandinavian, Russian, Finnish, etc. All red blonde or red haired, very tall and fierce. So I had to go into the mythology because something I have learned recently is that mythology is based on facts. Is that they might have had an, sometimes in the Hollywood movies that are based on real testimonies, real life histories. They are adding a little romance to this. I think this is the same way with mythology, is that it was embellished. I would believe that, but nevertheless, I have found with my researches that mythology is based on facts. And again, I'm not saying that they did not embellish those facts, just like Hollywood does with real life histories or real testimonies, in order to not put us to sleep. So here's what I found about the Norse and Finnic mythology about the Jotuns. So who and what were the Jotuns, also called the ice giants? This is part 1. I will put the link in the video description. The name of the person who wrote that, I don't have the name. We have the list of references here. The name is not mentioned, but I will put the link in the video description so that there is no misunderstanding that I'm not the one who wrote that. And I'm just reading, okay? Because I don't pretend to know everything under the sun, and I don't know much about the Jotuns. So here we go. We're going to read this. The Nordic giants, common misconceptions and corrections. When Norse mythology is perused in folkloric studies or in other accounts, usually the concentration lies on the deeds of the Aesir, among whom are, for instance, the popular Odin and Thor. Some of the less well-known branches of the Nordic sagas are the stories about the Jotuns, also called the Ice or Frost giants. This underappreciated folklore may be often neglected simply because, from the Middle Ages on, giants have usually been depicted as dumb, boorish creatures with little interest to anything else than bashing one another with clubs and eating peasants. In modern fantasy literature, the situation remains the same. When J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series slowly hinted that giants would step into the picture. I nurtured some hopes that the portrayal would be different from the usual cliche. This did not happen. Also, when it comes to Northern European folk stories related to trolls, they usually have at least a minor basis in the Jotun mythos, even if the impressions have become twisted considerably during the centuries. Namely, in the older Norse sagas, the nature of the Jotuns is quite different from the modern view. So, what were those Jotuns like, if not lumpy trolls with brains the size of half of a ping pong ball? For one thing, it was told that one of the roots of Yggdrasil, the word three, extended itself into a Jotunheim, the mythical home of the ice giants. It granted them lives of hundreds of years long. Many of them possessed wizardous powers, shape-shifting abilities, and their abodes were usually richly decorated fortresses or longhouse-type mansions instead of dirty, stinking caves with a sprinkle of straw on the floor. Despite their vast size, such adjectives as ugly were not all that often associated with them. Also, as the oldest beings of the universe, they had great amounts of knowledge and wisdom. The astute Mimir, from whom Odin acquired supreme wisdom by drinking from his well, was a Jotun. Another example of a sage-like giant is, I don't know how to pronounce that, Wafpronir. Sorry for the mispronunciation. The link will be posted. With whom Odin had a battle of wits. Wafprunismal recounts of the following. Odin spake, "Counsel me, Frigg, for I long to fare, and near fain would find fit wisdom old with the giant wise, myself would I seek to match." Frigg spake, "Here, father, here at home would I keep, where the gods together dwell, amid all the giants are in equal in might, to Vafrut near know I none." The wisdom then of the giant wise, forth did he fare to try, he would the hall of the father of him, and in forthwith went YGG. One of the best examples of the ice giant wizards is King Logi, also known as Uktagda Loki. He is not to be confused with Loki, the trickster character who, as many seem to forget these days, largely due to some of odd interpretations of media and video game industry, belong also to the Jotun Amish race. Anyhow, one of the stories in the Eddas tells how Thor traveled to Utgard and remained as the guest of Logi. The giant created several impressive magical illusions to test Thor's powers, bend time, and even made his fortress disappear in the eyes of Thor when it seemed that the thunder god would become a danger to him. Logi, furthermore, contradicts entirely the ugliness factor usually associated with giants. Thorstein's saga Viking Sonar described him in the following way. A king named Log ruled that country which is north of Norway. Log was larger and stronger than any other man in that country. His name was Lighten from Lodge to Alodge, and after him the country was called Alodgeland. Lodge was the fairest of men, and his strength and stature was likened to that of his kinsmen, the giants from whom he descended. The same saga also speaks of the elves of Alfheim, and surprisingly compares them to the giants when it comes to handsome looks. The land governed by King Alf was called Alfheim, and all his offspring are related to the elves. They were fairer than any other people save the giants. Quite a few belonging to the Aesir also had giantess wives and otherwise hordes of bastards with them. Freyr fell in love with the first sight of Gigor, the daughter of the giant Gymir, and solely because of her beauty. This very factor appears to be one of the major reasons wherefore the male Aesir quite commonly bedded giantesses. Hence, even through folklore seems to have rendered the giant image upside down, the original concept has been considerably different. It must, however, be pointed out that centuries ago, on the times when Snorri Sturluson authored the prose Edda and beyond, the concept of masculine handsomeness, as in Logi was in fairest of men, deviated significantly from that of the present day. It has rather little to do with the androgynous teenage boys depicted in anime, which at least on the internet has rewritten the concept of man beauty. Youth was an admirable quality, since it guaranteed quicker reflexes and strength not yet diminished by age, but there generally and the similarities. Furthermore, this comparison is valid only generally. Individual opinions can lie at the opposite ends of the galaxy. I have, so of course, because the names of the giants, and the Nordic mythology, I don't know myself Norwegian, so I don't know exactly how to pronounce those names, and also it's a little difficult for me to read, and also the different type of characters that are used on this page is why I am a little slow. I apologize for that. But correspondingly, female beauty had more to do with a plump, stout figure than the skeletal fashion models of today. Skinniness was a blaring sign of meager wealth and also sickliness, which implied that the woman was either unfertile or likely not to survive in childbirth. Such qualities were hardly desirable in a society where mortality rate was high. the disrupted continuing of the bloodline important and modern medicines unknown. Note that this was much here the corset whims of European aristocracy, which yet again reshaped the concept of female beauty. Regarding the less physical attributes, there obviously are examples of giants that find their pleasures in misdeeds and thievery and have just as much intelligence as a drowned ant. However, it is interesting to note that for instance the giant Hrungnir, who started bragging on having his powers and threatening the Aesir in his halls, was under the heavy influence of alcohol. Otherwise, he was described as a sharp-eyed man who owned one of the best horses about. If it had not specially been stated that he was a giant, wouldn't he, in this light, sound rather like your average human being? And in the end, Thor and charms are hardly any more cultivated. Thor often killed giants just because they were, well, giants. Freya paid the price of the necklace for dwarves had prepared for her by sleeping with each one of them in turn. It needs not to be explained that these kinds of attitudes and activities are called. There are countless of other examples of the Aesir not being anyhow morally or otherwise above the other races. Their immortality is also arguable. The story about Baldur, Odin's son, death is among the better known sagas. Everyone in Valhalla is heavily dependent of the apples of Odin in order to retain their youth and wits. Frankly, all the races in the Norse mythology are quite much of the same human level. All have their special skills and weaknesses. An inclination of scheming, thieving, and rashness is distributed evenly. Men, gods, dwarves, and giants likewise can possess intelligence and vice versa. The Jotuns identified. So, who actually were the Jotuns? It is even possible to attach something mundane to them, concerning that one is dealing here with mythology. Also note that the purpose here is not to promote any kind of racial supremacy, only to speculate possible connections between mythology and history. That's interesting, they are making that connection. Snorri Sturluson was among the first to introduce the theory of euhemerism, a concept that treats mythological characters as having once been real persons, but who have later become shrouded in mystery or have been elevated into deities. Ancestor worship has been an important part of practically every culture for thousands of years. Therefore, it only can be astonished over why real persons might more or less gradually turn into gods. The process can be beholden clearly even in the modern cultures, and the transformation does not require even many decades. Jack the Ripper and Adolf Hitler are good examples of very Fairly new occurrences considering that the recorded human history extends itself back thousands of years. Vlad III, the Impaler alias Dracula, is barely even considered a perfectly non-supernatural entity when is talked about. Not that the existence of the supernatural as such can be proven false, but that is not the topic of discussion here. Now that the concept of euhemerism was briefly explained, can we return to the measure's theme? Euhemerism will play an important role in the forthcoming speculations. The Eddas, which are perhaps the more known sources for the Jotun mythos, do not offer any exact information about neither the lands the giants inhabit nor reveal their ethnicity. Jotunheim is described as a mountainous, forbidding place near the World Sea. Thick forests and snow are mentioned, and such places as Primherm and Glacisvelir, glittering plains, are situated in the country. The Jotuns also wage constant wars with the Aesir, which would suggest that the myth has significant basis in some long-winged strife between a Germanic people, the Aesir, and some other northern race in the Scandinavian, Finland, Russian region. At least, it can be with certainty concluded that the Jotunheim did not lie anywhere near Sahara. In that case, the Jotuns would have been called melting ice giants. Yet, such epics as the Orkneyinga saga do give significant clues. The opening portion of the Orkneyinga saga, the discovery of Norway, mentions the following. There was a man called Frodjot. He had 3 sons. One was Leir, another Logi, the third Kari. He ruled over winds, but Lori over fire. Leir over the seas. Kari was the father of Jotuns, the father of the King Snow. But the children of King Snow were these: Tori, Fon, Drifa, and Mjol. Tori was a noble king. He ruled over Gotland, Vinland, and Finland. To him, the Vens sacrificed that it might be snowy, and that there might be good going on snowshoeing. Lier and Lori both are depicted as Jotuns in the Eddas. The exact translation of Frodjot's name of the Old Norse to English is not clear, but very likely it is composed of the words Forn and Jot, which together stand for Old Giant. In the other parallel form of the same story, he rules the same lands as his descendant Tori. As for those, Finland is a clear case, even though it is in this context would apply to a much smaller tribal region situated in the southwestern Finland, known in the old text as Varsinais-Suomi, the proper Finland. Besides, the geography of what is today collectively known as Finland was rather differently outlined in the Iron and Bronze Ages. The bedrock has risen with considerable speed during the millennia and has not yet halted on its way up. It should tell something that, for instance, the coastline of Ostrobonia was 100 kilometers more to the east 2,000 years ago, and that when the building of the castle of Turku began at the end of the 13th century. It was located on an island that could be approached only by ships. Nowadays, the castle stands on a long path of dry ground near the harbor of Turku. There exists a load of theories about the range and geographical placement of the Vinland, a now border-wise defunct land called Kenuma, Finnish, which would have been situated in either around Ostrobothnia or southern Finland, is the most popular suggestion. I am inclined to lean towards the Ostrobothnia case. See the Vinland example further in this article. Even though the reach of the terrain might have extended itself, perhaps even to the other side of the Gulf of Bothnia. So there was a line of men that can be identified as Jotuns and their old Finnic lands. That destruction did not yet prove that these mythical characters, possibly also Eumerized real people, would be finding themselves. Gotland belongs nowadays to Sweden, and yet, as such, this does not testify either that Fornjot's kin would have been a Germanic origin or spoken a Proto-Germanic language. The borders of lands change during centuries. New countries crop up, old ones merge together, some die entirely. Finland was for a time under both Sweden and Russia's reign, and after the World War II, such fine Finnish lands as Karelia have again belonged to the Soviet Union and now to Russia. Estonia and Latvia emerged from Russia in the early 90s. And both their languages belong to the same Baltic Finnic family as Finnish. Again, language does not explicitly mean that someone is of a certain ethnic origin. Nevertheless, in the case of the Baltic Finnic languages and the tribe people speaking them, genealogy studies suggest that these two attributes are up to some degree linked together via certain allogroups inherited through the father line. This will be dealt with later. To be frank, my personal interest is more targeted towards the mystery of the spoken languages of the so-called giants. Genes commonly become mixed over time, and it's hard to find anything that would purely, between commas, present the first father-mother origin, unless the descendants are clones or products of long-winded incest. However, some light has to be cast in genealogy if one wishes to address any physical features. More proof on top of the already proposed details is needed before it can be suggested that the Jotuns were Finnic. Folklore and etymology can lend a few helping hands here. When this particular topic is scrutinized further, interesting cultural parallels and complete matches can be found in the folk tales of the Finnic peoples. For some reason, this has largely fallen into shadow and is scarcely considered a relevant detail even among etymologists who have attempted construing the origins and meaning of some of the names of the Jotun characters. Stories about giants as the ancestral inhabitants of Finnic lands are very common to the folklore of these peoples. Kalevala and Kalevipoeg, which are the national epics of Finland and Estonia, respectively, talk mostly about heroes which are giants. The previous does not implicitly name the main characters as such, but Finnish folklore stamps anyhow the men originating from Kalevala, Kalevaznen as giants. Kalevanpojat, sons of Kaleva. Kalevala's composer Elias Lönnrot also edited at least 50% of the poetry collected and invented whole chunks of the epic himself. He may have thus intentionally left out the giant origin. Kalevipoeg, however, is entirely open about it. 3 giant sons of, well, obviously a giant, leave some area of the present-day Finland. One of them, called Kalev, becomes the king of Estonia, and Father Soini, the giant hero who performs quite a few of the same deeds as are associated with Lemminkäinen and Väinämöinen in Kalevala. The 2 epics mentioned above are only a part of the giant folklore of the Finnic peoples, but serve as excellent reference material. Even if Lönnrot and Frederick Reinhold Kreutzwald, the author of Kalevipoeg, I have a hard time pronouncing those names, both edited the folk legends, the characters, their deeds, and nature still have derived from the pieces they collected from singers of Kalevalic poetry in the 19th century. Undoubtedly, the composers of the Norse sagas have also littered their works with their own quirks, omissions, and additions. One more interesting detail is that a considerable amount of these Finnic giant stories are in fact unknown in the Norse sagas. They may have been simply lost in the course of centuries, but overall this suggests that their origin indeed was a different culture, and particularly a Finnic one. As far as I'm aware, there is no Norse equivalent, for instance, for the Kullervo cycle famous in Finnic, Baltic, Kalevalaic poetry. Kullervo is a bestseller. Kullervo is a berserker type giant who jumps from calamity to disaster during his life and ends up slowly destroying everything dear to him. Frustrated by his tragic fate, he finally rids himself of his life by throwing himself upon his own sword. The Kullervo cycle inspired J.R.R. Tolkien to compose the story of Turin Tarambar in Silmarillion. However, let us return to the similarities. The attributes of the 3 most famous Finnish giant heroes, Väinämöinen, Lemminkäinen, and Ilmarinen, who are also brothers and sons of Kaleva in many contexts, have a considerable likeness to some of the most notable giant characters of the Norse sagas. Let us observe them with some details and see whether through them the Finnic Jotun relation could be straightened. It also should be recalled that these characters, among others, were, as late as in the early 20th century folklore, seriously regarded as the forefathers of the Finns. Alright. Lemminkainen is a hot-headed warrior and seducer famous for his extremely handsome looks. His original name seems to have been Lake Kyo Flame, likely due to his red hair. Lemminkainen as such translates approximately to one who lusts or one who makes love and evidently serves as a later acquired by name spawn by the fame of his ravenous troll snake. He is also a mighty sorcerer, as the following excerpt from Kalevala points out. Then the singer Lemminkainen quick began his incantations, straightway sang the songs of witchcraft. From his fur robe darts the lightning, flames outshooting from his eyeballs. From the magic of his singing sang the very best of singers to the very worst of minstrels, filled their mouths with dust and ashes, peeled the rocks upon their shoulders, still the best of Lapland witches, still the sorcerers and wizards. Then he banished all their heroes to the whirlpool hot of flaming, to the water deck with sea foam, into fires and boiling waters, into everlasting torment. Then the hero Lemminkainen sang the foemen with their broadswords, sang the heroes with their weapons, sang the eldest, sang the youngest, sang the middle-aged, enchanted. Only one he left his senses. Now remember the handsome Jotun wizard Logi from the earlier discussion. His name in Old Norse has exactly the same meaning as Yekyo. These two characters bear such similar traits that they can only be one and the same person. Lemminkainen possesses also shape-shifting abilities, but this is probably due to the later time mixed with Loki, who would better correspond to the Finnish god of underworld Tuoni. The similarities and differences between Lemminkainen, Logi, and Loki are, however, out of the scope of this discussion. Ilmarinen is the god of air and winds of the Finnic pantheon, and also the famous blacksmith who forged a magical mill, Sampo, and tamed Iron Wind. There was but bronze to make weapons from. It is not so easy to associate with a counterpart in Norse sagas as Lemminkainen Logi, but the aforementioned fragment from the Orkneyinga saga gives a hint. Claire and Logi are the brothers of Kari, whose names means wind, and he, besides, rules over them. Kari is also a kenning for wind in Pelur. Väinämöinen, Ilmarinen, and Lemminkainen are brothers, and Ilmarinen translates as fully of air, airy, windy. Hence, he and Kari have to be considered one and the same. Väinämöinen is the old sage and wizard, and he is oftentimes depicted as sailing around in a boat or otherwise associated with water. Some variations of the Finnic world creation myths describe him as having been born from the sea or having floating in the water when a duck lays an egg on his knee. Väinämöinen moves his leg, the eggs drop down, and from the shattered halves, the earth and sky are formed. Certain water and navigation terminology bear his name within. For instance, oh my gosh, Väinämöisen, Väinächalki, the boat trail of the Väinämöinen, a calm patch of water amidst surfs, whilst his own epitaph, Osmoinen, Suvantolinen, always somehow contained the concept of water within. The common name, Väinämöinen, most likely derives itself from Väinö, calm water, strait. Väinämöinen and Odin bear significantly similar characteristics. Both old men are associated with poetry, wisdom, and they wander from land to land, passing on judgment or appearing as a shaman, wise man. However, in such legendary stories as the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle can be believed, Wotan Odin would have lived somewhere around the 4th century. Finnic mythology seems to extend itself much farther back, as according to some researchers, the sons of Kaleva had been known in the Finnic regions already before Christ. Interestingly, Johannes Mythonius, an historian that lived in the 17th century, mentions in his First of Finnic Kings that the first one ruled around 600 BC. This list coincides with the Fonjot lineage, and thus would deposit the broader trio Ler, Logi, Kari into the turn point of Bronze and Iron Ages. This would indeed give Lariman Kari a great deal of credibility as the first ironsmith in the North. These timings are nevertheless only speculative milestones, even if interesting ones as such. If these characters have a basis in reality, they still may have lived centuries later or before, or even on different eras each. Yet if Mythonius' standpoint is taken as a guideline, this would imply that the Eumerimized Odin sucked in attributes that originally belonged to Väinämöinen hundreds of years before, aside from a tangle of others' influences. The whole sacrificial hanging from the world tree and getting pierced by a spear distinctly have been adopted in the wake of Christianism arrival in the northern Europe and have nothing to do with the original Odin. I should have thought to record music that would be fitting with what I'm reading in order to be less, because I'm aware that I have chronic fatigue and I can, the way I talk, there's a lack of, energy, so that I should have put music, but it's better late than never. So there it goes. Finnish, however, knows such words as Jatit, Jatilainen, which simply means a giant, large-sized person. It would seem that Gotar, Jotnar, etc. are all dialectal or twisted variations of the much older Finnish word Jatit in plural, which means it even closer to the three different language plural forms. There are also such variations of giant in Finnish as Jotuni and Jatui. There is an etymology bridge to the already suggested Finnic origin. I'm afraid that the music is too loud. I'll put it lower. Sagas and chronicles furthermore trace the Geats and Jutes back to the Fornjot lineage together with the Danes, who are, for example, in Jordanes writings depicted as being one of the tallest tribes in Scandinavia. Both the Jutes, Anglo-Saxon chronicles, and Geats, Gutta Saga share a common ancestor called Gudi or Godi. Godi and the Danes are linked together by a common ancestor called, oh, I can't pronounce this. Whatever. Seriously. Skillul, who then again, according to Gesta Danorum, is the descendant of Dan. Gesta Danorum is in several accounts. Skunda Illustrata, the brother of Tori, who then again descends from Forjot, a Nordic family tree built by employing several tens of pseudo-mythical sources. It is incomplete yet, and some parts of it are very speculative, but it should give an insight into what the mythology actually says about the Jotun ancestry, containing the aforementioned lineage can be found here. Link will be posted in the video description. There is a second etymological connection to Finnish in the Old Norse word purd, which means giant. Bound to this is the byname Pursa, where the whole frost ice giant's title comes from. It has been speculated that Pors follow the same hunger model than the Jotuns by meaning thirst or akin. Yet Finnish contains Tursas, which has a few different meanings: sea monster, octopus, a general monster, and also walrus. The last one is deducted from the synonym of the old Finnic shamanistic symbol Tusan Sidan Mursun Sidan, the herd of Tursas walrus. The last option might be the most plausible, that the octopus variant is probably a later edition developed from the earlier sea monster. Seal hunting has always been an important trade in Arctic cultures. Walrus as a heavy-set sea creature, can weigh over 2,000 kilos, may well have been considered an impressive totem animal. In any case, walrus motifs can be found in Finnish Iron Age artistry. For instance, a skillfully wrought Merovingian sword excavated in Vesilahti of Finland, as several walruses depicted in the pommel. The Fornjot Kalevanpojat lineage, which has already been considered considerable scrutiny. I repeat because the music is too loud. Okay. The Fornjot Kalevanpojat lineage, which has already been under considerable scrutiny, does have name which wise matches in Finnic accounts, even if most of them are mangled. Ganaders, Mythologica, Phoenicia, and Messenius Scandia recognize the intact bloodline, but the names have journeyed an old cycle, first from Finnish to Old Norse, there to Swedish, and back again to Finnish again. It is the collected family tree that can be found the names that some fragmented Finnish folk verses suggest as the original ones. For instance, Old Norse Snarr, Finnish Niera both mean snow. Likewise, as happened in with Odin and Venemoinem, it would be seen that Thor's cornerstones lie in Tori. Originally, the Finnish Iku Tierra Niera Poika, both Tierra and Tori means frozen snow. Tori is obviously a direct translation. The Vars Chronicle of Finland, a part of Skondia, mentions the following about this king. Translation to English, mine meaning the author, not me, with note in brackets. His Snare Obli's son Thor was akin to his father, and he ruled over many a land and had also two brothers. Then Thor died. The Council of Vinland ordered that he should be worshipped as the supreme god in the whole dominion, and that he should be brought sacrifices at the beginning of each year, so that he would be benign to his people and would grant a favorable start for the season. They named the first month after him, Old Norse Pori, nowadays February, as one day besides Thursday. Foolishly they believed him to rumble in the sky, but when his daughter Goija died, they elevated also this woman to sit as a goddess in the heavens. And as we can see in our calendars, the second month is named after her, Old Norse Goi, nowadays March. And thenceforth, all the Scandinavians agreed to submit to this belief. Tori, here distinctly called Thor, was decreed a thunder god after his death by the Council of Vinland. Tierra gradually turned into Yuko, Thor. Yuko and Iku mean actually the same, and thereafter got divided into the separate thunder deities of two cultures, the Finnic and Teutonic. Yuko or Yuku in the previous, Thor in the later. Etymology has had its chance to speak, adding this to the similarities between the Norse and Finnic giant folklore. There should be enough evidence that the origin of Jotuns, Kalevanpojat, was indeed Finnic, perhaps specifically Gvenlandish. At least the quoted excerpts give the impression that Tori and his kin lived in Vinland, concerning that it was the consent of this land that decreed, for instance, the drastic law about Tori's post-mortem divinity, even though Kei Nunma would have situated just about in the heart of today's Finland. I'll continue using the term Finnic instead of Finnish in the following discussion, since linguistic and genetic changes have occurred quite a bit into or more millennia. This therefore raises the question that were the Geats, Jutes, etc. actually of Germanic origin, if Fonjot Galeva hypothetically was their ancestor, or were they in the most primary phase of some sort of mixed between Comas genealogy of Finnic and Germanic tribes who originally spoke a Finnic dialect, but during the following centuries moved always further to the south, married more and more from the other Germanic tribes, and finally adopted Proto-German as their language. Proto-Finnish and Proto-German have considerable vocabulary similarity with one another, so they have obviously been in heavy skill interaction with one another at some point. Finnish even today contains oodles of words that are in exactly the same shape as in Proto-German, but which have morphed into something quite different in today's Germanic languages, Swedish, Danish, Dutch, etc. One such is Kuningas Finnish, which was in the form of Kuningas in Proto-German, and now bounces around in such variants as king, koning, kung, kongyun, and so on. Also, according to the Germanic chronicles and Teutonic mythology, the Goths indeed originated somewhere from Finno-Scandia and migrated away in several phases, always southwards. Even modern documentary history recognizes these resettlements. These questions, among others, will be speculated in the forthcoming parts of this article, and there are references, of course, listed at the end of it. And if I go back here, I don't know if I will get the name of the author. Let's see. No. So, thank you for your time, and I know it will be helpful to understand better what actually did happen. Good day. To what I have said, which is, I knew the tribe of the serpent attacked the native Aboriginal people. They also have fought the red-haired giants. Somebody said her YouTube ID is eblasphemy1. She said, I'll bet they were Scandinavian, Russian, Finnish, etc. All red blonde or red haired, very tall and fierce. So I had to go into the mythology, because something I have learned recently is that mythology is based on facts. Is that they might have had an, sometimes in the Hollywood movies that are based on that are based on real testimonies, real life histories. They are adding, they are adding a little romance to this. I think this is the same way with mythology, is that it was embellished. I would believe that, but nevertheless, I have found with my researches that mythology is based on facts. And again, I'm not saying that they did not embellish those facts, just like Hollywood does with real life histories or real testimonies, in order to not put us to sleep. So, here is what I found about the Norse and Finnic mythology about the Jotuns. So, who and what were the Jotuns, also called the Ice Giants? This is part 1. I will put the link in the video description. The name of the person who wrote that, I don't have the name. We have the list of references here. The name is not mentioned, but I will put the link in the video description so that there is no misunderstanding that I'm not the one who wrote that. And I'm just reading, okay? Because I don't pretend to know everything under the sun, and I don't know much about the Jotuns. So here we go. We're going to read this. The Nordic giants, common misconceptions and corrections. When Norse mythology is perused in folkloric studies or in other accounts, usually the concentration lies on the deeds of the Aesir, among whom are, for instance, the popular Odin and Thor. Some of the less well-known branches of the Nordic sagas are the stories about the Jotuns, also called the Ice or Frost giants. This underappreciated folklore may be often neglected simply because, from the Middle Ages on, giants have usually been depicted as dumb, boorish creatures with little interest to anything else than bashing one another with clubs and eating peasants. In modern fantasy literature, the situation remains the same. When J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series slowly hinted that giants would step into the picture, I nurtured some hopes that the portrayal would be different from the usual cliché. This did not happen. Also, when it comes to Northern European folk stories related to trolls, they usually have at least a minor basis in the Jotun mythos, even if the impressions have become twisted. Consider Wafprunir, sorry for the mispronunciation. The link will be posted, with whom Odin had a battle of wits. Wafprunnismal recounts of the following. Odin spake, "Counsel me, Frigg, for I long to fare, and near fain would find fit wisdom old with the giant wise, myself would I seek to match." Frigg spake, "Here, father, here at home would I keep, where the gods together dwell, amid all the giants are equal in might to Vafrūt near no I none. The wisdom then of the giant wise, for did he fare to try, he would the hall of the father of him, and in forthwith went YGG. One of the best examples of the ice giant wizards is King Logi, also known as Uktagda Loki. He is not to be confused with Loki, the trickster character who, as many seem to forget these days, largely due to some probably during the centuries, namely in the older Norse sagas, the nature of the Jotuns is quite different from the modern view. So, what were those Jotuns like, if not lumpy trolls with brains the size of half of a ping pong ball? For one thing, it was told that one of the roots of Yggdrasil, the word three, extended itself into a Jotunheim, the mythical home of the ice giants. It granted them lives of hundreds of years long. Many of them possessed wizardous powers, shape-shifting abilities, and their abodes were usually richly decorated fortresses or longhouse-type mansions instead of dirty, stinking caves with a sprinkle of straw on the floor. Despite their vast size, such adjectives as ugly were not all that often associated with them. Also, as the oldest beings of the universe, they had great amounts of knowledge and wisdom. The astute Mimir, from whom Odin acquired supreme wisdom by drinking from his well, was a Jotun. Another example of a sage-like giant is, I don't know how to pronounce that,